It's November 24th, 1971, and Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 is taking off from Portland, Oregon, heading for the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, 175 miles north in Washington state. The Boeing 727-51 is slightly more than a third full, so flight attendant Florence Schaffner expects the 30-minute flight to be largely uneventful. Then, a male passenger seated in the last row of cabin seats hands her a note. Assuming the man in the dark suit is trying to give her his phone number, Schaffner tosses the note into her purse on the floor beside her jump seat. The passenger, who had purchased his ticket under the name Dan Cooper, leans close to Schaffner and warns her that he has a bomb in his briefcase, so she'd better do as he says. Schaffner quickly retrieves the note from her purse and reads the message. "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase and want you to sit by me." The frightened flight attendant does as requested and then asks to see the bomb. Cooper obliges, opening his briefcase to reveal what Schaffner later described as 8 red cylinders attached to a battery by red insulated wires. With her undivided attention, Cooper explains that he is hijacking the plane and instructs Schaffner to deliver his ransom demands to the flight crew. While the flight attendant hurries to the cockpit with his instructions, Cooper relaxes and sips the cocktail Schaffner served him minutes earlier. Despite the mysterious hijacker's relative calm, the events that unfold over the next 8 hours will become one of the most infamous cases in American crime history and stump the FBI for nearly half a century. So, who is Dan Cooper? Stick around and find out as we delve into the mysterious case of D.B. Cooper. On the afternoon of November 24, 1971, a man wearing a dark suit and tie, a raincoat, and loafers approaches the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter at the Portland International Airport. The man, who multiple witnesses later described as being in his mid-40s, standing between 5 feet 10 and 6 feet tall, with brown eyes and dark hair, pays $20 cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, SeaTac. Cooper requests to be assigned to the last row of seats aboard Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 to SeaTac to ensure he has a view of the entire cabin and to prevent anyone from sneaking up on him. With a black case in his lap and a brown paper bag on the empty seat beside him, Cooper orders a bourbon and 7-Up from flight attendant Florence Schaffner before settling in for takeoff. Less than 30 minutes later, the hijacker hands Schaffner the infamous note that sets off one of the most enduring and controversial mysteries in American crime lore. When Captain William Scott learns of the hijacking, with a passenger demanding $200,000, 4 parachutes, and a refueling truck upon landing in Seattle, he directs Florence Schaffner to stay in the cabin and keep detailed notes for the upcoming investigation into the hijacking. Scott then contacts the airline's Flight Operations Center in Minnesota and informs them of the situation. For the next 2 hours, the plane circles Puget Sound, allowing the FBI and local authorities to gather Cooper's ransom demands. During that time, flight attendant Tina Mucklow serves as a go-between for the hijacker and the flight crew. Mucklow would later tell authorities that Cooper was a nice man with whom she chatted as they circled above Seattle. At one point, she even asks Cooper why he chose Northwest Orient to hijack. Cooper chuckles and replies that it isn't because he has a grudge against her airline, it's just that he has a grudge. Mucklow would also testify later that Cooper seemed familiar with the local terrain as viewed from above. He recognized the city of Tacoma as they passed over it and mentioned correctly that McChord Air Force Base was only a 20-minute drive from SeaTac. Though the comment seemed inconsequential to Mucklow at the time, Cooper's small talk would play an essential role in the investigations following the hijacking. At 5:46 p.m., Flight 305 touches down in Seattle and is directed to park on an unused runway away from the main terminal. A mobile staircase is positioned at the front door of the aircraft, enabling Tina Mucklow to retrieve the 4 parachutes and $200,000 in cash that Cooper demanded. Northwest Seattle's operation manager, Al Lee, is tasked with delivering the money and parachutes to Mucklow, but only after the FBI photographs each bill and records its serial number. There are discussions by law enforcement about rigging the parachutes to fail, but the fact that Cooper demanded more than one chute leads authorities to fear he might force a flight crew member to jump with him. As a result, the 2 main parachutes are packed properly, though one of the reserve chutes, which is used for training, is sewn shut. When Mucklow delivers the chutes to Cooper, she also offers him printed instructions on operating them, but the hijacker claims he doesn't need them. Once Cooper has the money and the parachutes, he releases all 36 passengers, along with flight attendants Florence Schaffner and Alice Hancock. While the freed hostages disembark, Mucklow watches Cooper inspect the ransom money. When she jokingly asks for a cut of the cash, Cooper offers Mucklow a stack of bills, which the flight attendant refuses, citing the airline's policy against accepting tips. Mucklow also later reported to authorities that Cooper was unhappy about the money being delivered in a cloth bag instead of the canvas knapsack he requested. Using a pocket knife, Cooper cut the canopy from one of the reserve parachutes and then used the empty bag to hold a portion of the $10,020 bills he had demanded. While on the ground in Seattle, an unexpected delay in the refueling process causes Cooper to grow impatient and demand that they get airborne again. He then passes along his next set of demands to the flight crew through Tina Mucklow. His instructions state that they are to fly to Mexico City with the landing gear deployed, the flaps lowered to 15 degrees, and at the slowest possible speed without threatening to stall the aircraft. Cooper also insists that they are not to ascend above 10,000 feet, which would require the aircraft to be pressurized. After doing some quick calculations, First Officer Radachek tells the hijacker that the aircraft will only have a range of about 1,000 miles if configured the way Cooper demands. As a result, they will have to stop and refuel at Reno Tahoe International Airport. Knowing that he doesn't intend to reach Mexico City, Cooper agrees to the refueling stop. As a final demand, he tells the flight crew that they are to take off from SeaTac with the rear exit door open and the air stair lowered. However, the airline refuses this request and insists that taking off with the stairs lowered is unsafe. Cooper reluctantly relents on this demand and agrees to open the rear door after they are airborne. But he also insists Tina Mucklow remain on board to help with the procedure. About 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 takes off from SeaTac, heading for Reno Tahoe International, with only Dan Cooper, Tina Mucklow, Captain Scott, First Officer Radachek, and Flight Engineer Anderson on board. 3 military jets, including a pair of F-106 fighters from McChord Air Force Base and a Lockheed T-33 Air National Guard trainer, are scrambled to tail the 727 as it heads due south. The military aircraft are forced to fly S patterns to remain airborne and out of sight of the slow-moving 727. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper instructs Tina Mucklow to open the rear door and lower the air stairs, but the flight attendant is afraid she'll be sucked out. She asks the hijacker to let her retrieve a length of rope from the cockpit or cut some parachute cord to secure herself to a seat in the cabin. Instead, he orders Mucklow to go to the cockpit and remain there for the duration of the flight. Before leaving him, Mucklow begs Cooper to take the bomb with him when he jumps. Minutes later, at 8 p.m., a drop in cabin pressure causes the flight crew's ears to pop. A warning light in the cockpit flashes, indicating the rear staircase is being deployed. Captain Scott contacts Cooper over the plane's intercom system, asking if he needs assistance. The one-word reply is a simple no. It's the last time anyone will ever hear of D.B. Cooper. At 8:13 p.m., co-pilot Bill Radicek notes that they are near the rural community of Ariel, Washington, roughly 20 miles north of Portland, Oregon. For the next 2 hours, Tina Mucklow and Captain Scott attempt to contact Cooper over the cabin's intercom system, but they receive no reply. Unsure if the hijacker and his bomb are still on board, Scott has no choice but to fly to Reno and land with the staircase deployed. When Flight 305 touches down at Reno Tahoe International Airport at 11:02 p.m., the aircraft is surrounded by federal and local law enforcement. After a quick search of the cabin by Captain Scott comes up empty, it is assumed Cooper leaped from the plane at some point during the flight, though it is difficult to say precisely when. After a 30-minute search by a bomb squad, the 727-51 is declared safe. But the legend of D.B. Cooper is just beginning. While the bomb squad is searching the aircraft, local police and the FBI begin interviewing witnesses in Portland, Seattle, and Reno. A number of now infamous composite sketches are created from witness descriptions. The police sketches are so detailed and strikingly similar that they immediately become law enforcement's primary tool for eliminating suspects. The official investigation, known as NORJAC, moves rapidly in the early stages. Along with 66 latent fingerprints lifted from the 727's cabin, investigators recover Cooper's black clip-on tie and 2 of the 4 parachutes, one of which is missing 3 shroud lines that attach to the canopy. As the evidence begins to pile up, so does the FBI's suspect list, which balloons to over 800 people. In Portland, local police track down and interview known criminals whose records include similar crimes to the one they're investigating. One of the earliest suspects is named D.B. Cooper, a man with a minor criminal record. This Cooper is quickly eliminated as a suspect, but a reporter named James Long, who worked for the Oregon Journal, mistakenly attributes the moniker D.B. Cooper to the real hijacker. When fellow journalist Clyde Jabin republishes the mix-up over the United Press International wire service, the mistaken identity of D.B. Cooper becomes part of history. Physically tracking down Dan Cooper in the rugged and remote Cascade Mountains of Washington state proves daunting. The 727's varying airspeed, coupled with the fact that no one knows precisely when Cooper jumped or how long he was in freefall before deploying his parachute, means the search area is a vast swatch of rugged Pacific Northwest terrain. The search involves ground teams, helicopters, and fixed-winged aircraft, but dense forests and challenging weather conditions make the hunt extremely difficult. On December 6, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover authorizes the use of an SR-71 Blackbird spy plane to search the flight path taken by the 727. Unfortunately, the high-resolution photographs capture no sign of Dan Cooper, the parachutes, or the money. When aerial searches fail to uncover any clues as to the fate of Cooper, the FBI reconstructs the hijacking. Flying the same Northwest Orient Airlines 727-51 in the same configuration, pilots retrace the flight path of Flight 305. 20 minutes after takeoff, the rear door is opened and the aft staircase is lowered. A 200-pound sled is then pushed from the rear opening of the aircraft, causing the tail section to rise as it did during the hijacking. Investigators now had an accurate estimate of when and where Cooper jumped from the aircraft. However, a subsequent search based on extrapolations about the size and location of the landing area still turned up no clues before the winter snows arrived, making a physical search nearly impossible. Following the spring thaw of 1972, The physical search for D.B. Cooper continued and now includes 200 soldiers from nearby Fort Lewis, United States Air Force personnel, law enforcement, National Guardsmen, and civilian volunteers. Clark and Cowlitz counties are scoured for evidence for 36 days in March and April. A submarine is even employed to search the 200-foot deep waters of nearby Lake Merwin. The investigation finally uncovers a set of human remains, but they are later identified as those of a female kidnap victim named Barbara Ann Deary. Despite the exhaustive efforts by the FBI and local law enforcement agencies and numerous reward offers from Northwest Orient Airlines and several newspapers, no trace of Cooper or the money is found. In 1975, the Global Indemnity Insurance Company complied with a court order and paid Northwest Orient Airlines $180,000 claim against the ransom money they paid. That's the equivalent of just over $1 million in 2024 money. Over the next 5 years, the case grows increasingly cold. Then, law enforcement finally catches a break. On February 10, 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram is camping with his family along the Columbia River, about 20 miles southwest of Ariel, Washington. Buried in the muddy riverbank where he's attempting to build a fire, Brian uncovers 3 packets of cash totaling $5,800. Although the bills have partially disintegrated from prolonged exposure to the elements, they're still bundled together in rubber bands with their serial numbers intact. The FBI is able to match the serial numbers to the photographs taken of the ransom money in 1971 and confirm that the recovered cash came from the hijacking of Flight 305. The bills are even stacked in the same order they were given to Cooper 9 years earlier. The discovery launches another round of extensive searches in the area, but no other evidence is found. Instead of moving the case forward, the new lead creates more questions than answers, as investigators cannot even agree on whether the bills were intentionally buried along the Columbia River or carried there and covered by the current during the intervening years. And the fact that no other bills from the ransom money have ever been found in circulation is proof to many that Cooper didn't even survive the jump. Some experts and amateur investigators believe Cooper may have had a military or skydiving background, which would have increased his chances of survival. But most professional skydivers insist it is unlikely he could have survived a 10,000-foot jump through 200-mile-an-hour winds and frigid rain wearing loafers, a business suit, and a raincoat. More importantly, the parachute Cooper chose for his jump wasn't designed to be steered, so the hijacker had no control over where he landed. The chances of him reaching the ground safely in the dense forests of the Cascade Mountains are highly unlikely. Despite the slim chances of anyone surviving that jump, skeptics are quick to point out that the extensive search efforts from the air would have likely spotted Cooper's parachute had it been tangled in the trees. This critical fact, along with the 2019 release of a contemporary robbery report by the FBI, has helped keep the D.B. Cooper investigation alive in the world of online sleuthing. On July 8, 2016, the FBI officially suspended the D.B. Cooper investigation after 45 years, making it the only unsolved air piracy case in aviation history. The FBI made the decision to allocate their resources to more pressing cases, but they've opened up their files to the public, allowing online sleuths to keep the half-century-old investigation alive. In 2009, a handful of online sleuths calling themselves the Cooper Research Team, CRT, took up the case, applying modern technology and investigative tools that were unavailable in 1971. Though the group never definitively proved who Dan Cooper was, they were able to provide new evidence by testing the $1.49 black clip-on JCPenney tie the hijacker left behind when he leaped into the abyss 38 years earlier. Using an electron microscope, the group identified hundreds of metallic and organic particles on the tie, including unalloyed titanium, a rarely used metal in 1971. The CRT didn't make much headway after their discovery, but the particles on the tie would serve as breadcrumbs for other online sleuths looking into the Cooper mystery. In 2019, interest in the D.B. Cooper case got a big boost when the FBI released a report detailing the robbery of a convenience store in Hyson, Washington, just 3 hours after the D.B. Cooper hijacking. According to the report, a man matching Dan Cooper's description entered a grocery store in the unincorporated community, which is located about 6 miles south of Ariel. This is the same town that co-pilot Radachek noted was below Flight 305 when Cooper made his jump. Instead of demanding money from the register, the thief only stole survival items like beef jerky and a warm pair of gloves. Though no connection between the hijacking and robbery is ever proven, online investigators believe the thief was the man calling himself Dan Cooper. So, out of 800 possible suspects, who do law enforcement and online sleuths believe hijacked Flight 305? A favorite of the FBI has long been Richard McCoy, a former Army paratrooper and helicopter pilot who was arrested for committing a similar hijacking several months after the D.B. Cooper incident. McCoy was being investigated by the FBI, but was killed in a shootout after breaking out of prison in 1974. Two men intimately involved in the case, parole officer Bernie Rhodes and FBI agent Russell Calamay, were so convinced McCoy was Cooper that they wrote a book naming him as the infamous hijacker. In the book, Rhodes and Calamay claimed that the only reason McCoy wasn't charged with the hijacking of Flight 305 was because the FBI failed to secure a search warrant before raiding his home. Dan Grider, a commercial airline pilot, skydiver, and amateur investigator, agrees with Rhodes and Calamay's findings that McCoy and Dan Cooper were one and the same. Not only did Grider reproduce the jump to prove that Cooper could have survived the hijacking, but he also interviewed McCoy's children, who both claim their father was the infamous hijacker. In 2020, Shantae and Eric McCoy came forward following the death of their mother, Karen. According to the siblings, their mother and father planned both the D.B. Cooper hijacking and the one Richard was arrested for a year later. Because their mother was complicit in both crimes, the children waited for her to pass before making their claim. Officially, though, the FBI eliminated Richard McCoy as a suspect in the case. Based on his appearance, his age, and credible evidence, McCoy was in Vegas on the day of the hijacking and at home in Utah for Thanksgiving dinner the day after. Other prime suspects of the FBI include Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam War veteran and former Army helicopter pilot, Kenneth Christensen, a former military paratrooper and Northwest Airlines employee who closely resembled the police sketches of Dan Cooper, and Walter Recca, a former military paratrooper and intelligence operative. There were at least a dozen prime suspects on the FBI's radar before the case was suspended in 2016, but no solid evidence has ever been found to definitively prove anyone on the Bureau's list was Dan Cooper. And according to online investigator Eric Eulis, this is because the real hijacker was never on their list of suspects. Eric Eulis, an independent investigator who has logged nearly 8,000 hours researching the D.B. Cooper hijacking over the last 13 years, believes modern technology will prove definitively before the end of 2024 that a man named Vincent Peterson was Dan Cooper. Working closely with Tom Kay, a scientist who was part of the Cooper research team in 2013, Euless traced the rare metals found on the hijacker's clip-on tie back to Crucible Steel in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. According to Euless and Kay, Vince Peterson was an engineer with the plant that provided most of the titanium and stainless steel Boeing used to build their aircraft, including the 727, throughout the 1960s and 70s. As an engineer with Crucible, Peterson would have had working knowledge of the 727's capabilities and systems. He would also likely have visited Boeing's offices in Seattle, which would have familiarized him with the geography of the Pacific Northwest. Euless and Kay petitioned the FBI to have the tie retested, but ultimately lost a court case when they sued for access. Still, Kay is confident his samples from 2013 contain DNA from the man who claimed to be Dan Cooper. He and Euless intend to submit the samples to a lab for cutting-edge metagenomic DNA testing, a process used to isolate individual strands of DNA. Vince Peterson's daughter, Julie Dunbar, has agreed to petition the FBI for access to the tie if Kay's DNA samples come back as a match for her father. Dunbar is adamant that her father was not D.B. Cooper, so she has agreed to work with Euless and Kay in order to clear her dad's name. At present, megagenomic DNA testing is very expensive and time-consuming, so Euless won't have his results until late in 2024. If he and Kay are right with their theory, they will have finally solved one of the most intriguing and enduring crime cases in American history. Until then, the world will have to continue speculating on the identity of the infamous D.B. Cooper.